How's it going, everybody? In this video, I'm going to be covering some additional information that we got on the Miller v. Becerra case, so let's talk about this. But real quick, before we jump into this video, if you think that California's ban on assault weapons violates the Second Amendment, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also, I want to give a shout out to some of the main sponsors of the channel, first being Customs. Thordson's provides California compliant parts for patriots like me and you, but they also do so much more than that. They also support legislation in cases which actually target abolishing those laws that make their parts relevant in the state of California. So Thordson's an amazing company. If you guys are interested in looking at them, I'll go ahead and put a link to them down in the details section. I also want to give a shout out to Got Your Six. For just $2.99 a month, you get access to a lot of amazing things on their app. This includes up-to-date local, state, and national legislative information, and they have cool features like the Initiate Freedom button. So if your Second Amendment rights are ever violated through something like a red flag law, you can click that button and a notification goes out to those members of your group. So if you're interested at looking at Got Your Six, I'll also put a link to them down in the details section. So Miller v. Becerra is one of those really high-profile cases coming out of the state of California, and it is before the Honorable Roger T. Benitez, or Saint Benitez as many of us in California like to call him. Now, I'm not going to talk comprehensively about what Miller v. Becerra entails. I have a whole playlist talking about Miller v. Becerra, and you can click this tab right there and it'll take you to those videos. And recently, this case was before Judge Benitez, and our side was actually seeking a motion for preliminary injunction, or was seeking a preliminary injunction to put a halt temporarily on that language here in the state of California, which prohibits individuals from being in possession, buying, and selling these items or firearms that California deems assault weapons. So there was a hearing on this motion for preliminary injunction, and what ended up happening is Judge Benitez did not grant the motion for preliminary injunction, but fast-tracked the trial hearing and set the trial for January 21st, 2021, so coming up here pretty soon. Now, what we're going to be talking about in this video has to do with some of the supplemental briefings that were submitted by our side, by Firearms Policy Coalition and some of these other parties that are named plaintiffs, as well as the supplemental briefs that were filed by the Attorney General's office. And the reason why we're going to be talking about these and some of the information that is revealed in these supplemental briefings is really it does just that. It reveals a lot of the issues that were brought up in the evidentiary hearing, as well as some of the thoughts and concerns that Judge Benitez had when that evidentiary hearing was before him. So one of the first things that stuck out to me after reading the AG supplemental briefs, as well as reading the supplemental briefs by our side, was this emphasis on distinguishing AR pistols, AK pistols, shotguns, or assault shotguns, or assault pistols as the AG's office was defining them, and also I think even Judge Benitez referenced them as those. The reason why this is important is because a lot of the discussion that we have revolving around Miller v. Becerra and the Assault Weapons Control Act has to do with a lot of emphasis on rifles or semi-automatic centerfire rifles. There's not a whole lot of discussion about how the Assault Weapons Control Act also targets other types of firearms like pistols, like shotguns, and even just normal pistols or AR pistols or specific types of tactical shotguns. So in reading through the supplemental briefs by the AG's office and our side as well, it seems like Judge Benitez had a lot of concern about there not being additional evidence about how common or the common use of specific types of firearms that are covered under the Assault Weapons Control Act, like AR pistols, like AK pistols, and like various types of shotguns, which may be defined as assault weapons in the state of California. And specifically, I want to read to you a comment that actually comes directly from Judge Benitez in the evidentiary hearing and was cited in the AG's papers. And so what Judge Benitez says is that, I do have a problem with the idea of these assault pistols and the same things with shotguns. I don't really have a whole lot of information about how common these may be. And what Judge Benitez seemed to have some concern about from reading through the papers was that there wasn't enough evidence or information submitted in our papers to show that those types of firearms are in common use, and therefore prohibiting the sale, possession of them is a violation of the Second Amendment. Now, to contrast that, when you look at the supplemental brief supported by our side, there's a ton of information supporting that these types of firearms, the AR pistols, AK pistols, specific types of tactical shotguns, are in fact in common use, not just in the state of California, but nationwide, and are therefore protected by the Second Amendment because they are in common use. They cite various things like, out of the 61 pistol manufacturers, there are at least 356 different models of firearms offered for sale defined as assault weapon pistols under Penal Code 30515, which is the Assault Weapons Control Act penal code we're talking about here. Some manufacturers, such as CMMG, offer 38 different models of California-banned assault pistols. Some of these manufacturers, such as Ruger, Sig Sauer, Springfield Armory, Beretta, each of which offer several models of pistols considered in California to be assault weapons, are widely held as some of the largest firearm manufacturers in the United States. So it's just interesting because when you read the supplemental briefs by the AG's office and by our side, it seemed like this issue of AR pistols, AK pistols, various shotguns that are actually potentially covered under the Assault Weapons Control Act, the issue of whether or not they are in common use or not seemed to be a big topic that might have popped up during the evidentiary hearing. And it seems like the AG's office really grasped on this, saying that there's no support, there's no evidence showing that these types of firearms are in common use across the US. And our side, I think, did a really easy job of getting rid of that argument by simply just showing, hey, there are tons of manufacturers who sell these various firearms that would potentially be covered under California's language, and tons of people actually purchase these items. So they are in fact in common use. And then another topic that was brought up in the AG's papers is they're saying that we failed to distinguish between the M16, which is the military rifle, to the AR-15 rifles, that they are not distinguishable. They are one and the same, in that Scalia, in his opinion in Heller, said that potentially AR-15s may be banned because they are similar to the M16s. Now, one thing I want to note about that a lot of people don't discuss, when you're looking at that Heller decision, and specifically that language that Scalia was talking about, where he said that these types of rifles may be regulated, that is dicta, and that is what we call dicta. It is not actually part of the opinion. It is simply a judge talking to themselves, but it's not actual legal authority or binding precedent. It is simply them talking, elaborating on some things, but it is not binding precedent. Because actually later on in that discussion, he said that, but that is not what we're deciding right now, because they weren't talking about rifles in Heller v. DC. So that is dicta, but the AG's office is trying to cite that as authority in saying that the state of California can prohibit these types of firearms, that these types of firearms are dangerous, not distinguishable between the M16 or AR-15. It's really just a weak argument in my opinion, but the AG's office is putting that forward as supplemental information. Now, one of the last things I want to bring up after reading the supplemental brief of our side is that some of the expert witnesses that the state presented are pretty laughable. There was first some discussion from one of these doctors who was talking about how lethal these assault weapons are, and that when someone is shot by them, it completely just destroys them. He saw one person come into the emergency room who was shot by one of these assault weapons, and his arm was completely destroyed and they had to amputate them. But then when our side asked him some questions about, well, how do you distinguish between these assault weapons? Did you know what firearm he was shot by? Can you even tell us the distinction between the type of rounds, like a .223 or a .762 that's shot by an AK? Can you tell us the difference between those? Do you even know what type of rounds these things shoot? Also, there was some discussion about, can you distinguish those types of rounds from other types of like hunting rounds or calibers? And the expert witness here that the state presented had no concept of any of that. Essentially, he was just putting his personal opinion because, of course, he's a biased individual and just wanted to talk about how destructive these items are. And then there was also further discussion about rounds and calibers. There was an expert witness who said that the calibers and rounds that assault weapons use are so much more lethal than other types of firearms, and that we need to get these off the street because they just are so devastating, the types of rounds that these firearms shoot, these assault weapons shoot. But then when he was asked further about, well, can you tell me the difference between these rounds that these weapons fire versus other rounds that you're saying are safer? Can you tell us about a .223? Can you tell us about a .556? Can you tell us about a .762, a .308, or even a .22 long rifle? These individuals really just have no concept. They're just making blind, blanket statements saying that the rounds that assault weapons shoot are so much more lethal. But when pressed on, can you actually differentiate or tell us how do you distinguish between these types of rounds? These experts pretty much just wilted and can't really distinguish because, again, they're making blanket statements. So all in all, I think when you look at the supplemental briefs that were submitted by the AG side and our side, I think some of the main things that came out is that there was a lot of discussion about AR pistols, AK pistols, potentially tactical shotguns, also threaded barrel pistols, things like that. Other types of firearms that are covered under the Assault Weapons Control Act that don't get a whole lot of attention. And then there was additional information in the supplemental brief pretty much showing how ridiculous the alleged expert witnesses for the AG's office were, that they had no firearms knowledge but were making some very bold, blanket statements to try to support what the state of California has done here in prohibiting specific types of firearms. Real quick before I end this video, I want to let you guys know that there's going to be a very important video that's going to be going up tomorrow, Friday at 7 o'clock. It's going to be a really significant update for this channel, California gun laws. The video is going to kind of be a 2-in-1. I'm giving you guys an important California case update as well as an important channel update. And so please stay tuned for 7 o'clock tomorrow. It's going to be a very important update. Like I said, you're not going to want to miss it. And again, I think it's really going to move the needle for this channel, but also for California gun laws as well. So make sure you're keeping an eye out for that video. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I'll try to answer to the best of my ability. Also, if you'd like to support this channel, one of the best ways you can do that is like, comment, subscribe, and make sure you hit that notification bell because it helps the channel analytics, helps us spread the word about the Second Amendment, also helps spread the word about things like this that are going on in the state of California. So as always, thanks guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and never forget this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.